Welcome to yet another episode. I am Marco Kiroglu. If you had any doubt that we are living in the last days, stay with me to the end of this video. From the book of Revelation, we are going to see that we are indeed in the very last days. We are indeed the last generation before the coming of Jesus Christ. The book of Revelation sheds a great amount of light onto our days as the last days. In fact, the book of Revelation is, as the name suggests, is a prophetic book regarding the last days. However, did you know, in the book of Revelation, the first 3 chapters provide for us an overview of the entire church era, the grace period, the entire church history. The 7 letters to the 7 churches in the book of Revelation provide for us 3 kinds of information. Firstly, it provides for us the historical fact that these churches existed in those locations. I was born in Turkey and I grew up there, and I can confirm to you that locations of these churches are also understood today as the location of these churches listed in the Bible by archaeologists and unbiblical historians as well. Secondly, these letters provide for us a representation for all the churches throughout the 2,000-year church era all over the world. So basically, when we look at these 7 letters, we see the 7 types of churches. And these churches are all around us all the time. So they are kind of a representation of the 7 types of churches that will coexist throughout the church history. But lastly, and I think the most importantly, these letters to the 7 churches provide for us 7 chronological periods or seasons in the church history. The first season is the season of the first church, the church in Ephesus. And then there comes the second one, third one, and if you carefully study, and if you're familiar with the church history, you will see that these churches, these 7 letters, chronologically follow one another, and they prophesy how Christianity will behave at large, globally, how Christianity will be characterized in these 7 different seasons throughout the church history. And now in the hindsight, when we look back to the church history, we are amazed to see exactly what has happened. If you look back and if you study these letters, you will realize what is written in these letters is actually what has happened in the past 2,000 years. That is amazing. That is just prophecy that is fulfilled. And now, we are in the last letter, in the last church period. That is found in Revelation chapter 3, from verse 14 down to verse 22. That is the lukewarm church of Laodicea. Now, this is the last church, and this is the last period in the church era. Now, please give ear to me carefully here. The lukewarm church of Laodicea represents the last church in the 2,000 years of church history, the last period, the last season in the church era. And you and I, we are right now living in that season. I think we were born in that season already. I think this season began at least around the beginning of 20th century. We can't pinpoint exact date, but we can see the characteristics. This church, some of the characteristics of this church, the church of Laodicea, or Christianity of our times, is that it is an incredibly rich, materially rich generation. Did you know human generation at large has never been as rich as they are today? Yes, there is poverty in parts of the world. There are people suffering famine and starvation. We know that. I'm not denying that. But at large, global village has never been as prosperous materially, as prosperous as it is today. Global village has never been as knowledgeable as they are today. They are rich in terms of materials, they possess, they use, they utilize, but they're also rich in terms of knowledge. That is the church in the book of, that is the church in Laodicea. That is the lukewarm church. But the biggest problem with this church that sets this church apart from the other churches is that it was a very lukewarm church. They knew Christ. They knew God. They knew the gospel. And they had some sort of association with Christ. They had some sort of relationship with Christ on the surface level. But they weren't genuine. They weren't serious. That's why Christ calls them the lukewarm church. Now that is our generation, folks. That is the church today. That is our churches today. They are lukewarm. They are rich. They are knowledgeable. They have unimaginable amount of material and resources and tools that they use, but their heart is cold. That is our generation. And furthermore, Jesus tells them, Jesus actually warns them that if they don't become hot or cold, if they continue as lukewarm, he's going to spit them out of his mouth. A very, very sober warning. So this is the church of Laodicea. This is the last church. This is the last period before the rapture. How do I know that? Just turn your eyes to the verse 1 in chapter 4 immediately after you read the last verse in chapter 3, that is verse 22. Then keep going. Let me just do that. Let me read verse 22. The last sentence Jesus has for the Laodicean church. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And then I'm going to read the first verse in chapter 4 that is just following. After these, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking to me, saying, Come up here, I will show you the things which must take place after this. It is amazing, guys. The Bible lays out barely all these details in front of our eyes. And only the Holy Spirit opens our eyes to these secrets as the right time comes. And I think this is the right time. And the Holy Spirit is revealing these secrets to us because we are in the season of the return of Jesus. And yes, what I just read in verse 1 of chapter 4 is the moment of rapture. That is the moment of rapture. After John has seen all these things in chapter 1, 2, and 3, and the last thing he saw in chapter 3 was the lukewarm church, the Laodicean church, that is our church. And after that, he heard the voice of the trumpet. And then the voice said, Come up here. And he saw a door standing open in heaven. And there we go up. There we are raptured. We are at the moment of rapture. And I pray sincerely and earnestly that I may not be found lukewarm, that you may not be found lukewarm, but you may be found hot. You may be found passionate, and you may be found diligently committed to Jesus Christ. God bless you, and goodbye.